Ain't no fun when the rabbit has the gun. Fear of reversal is one of the oldest engines of oppression. So, ain't no fun when the rabbit has the gun. It's a phrase that exposes this uncomfortable truth. The truth that oppression often is not driven by strength. It's driven by fear or loss of dominance, control. So when the predator senses that the prey is waking up, okay, that the hierarchy is at risk of being flipped, where there may be accountability, time for that accountability to show up, that's when the control starts to get a little tight. Okay, the rules start to harden up just a little bit. You see that violence start getting justified and even legalized at times we've seen in history, right? So, unfortunately, that fear is not coming from an innocent, sweet place. It's coming from this place of knowing that what you've been doing, now you imagining that being returned to you. So you know it's wrong because you wouldn't want it done to you, right? So I thought that I was going to blabber about my take on Avatar: Fire and Ash. Good movie, by the way. But then I ended up watching Judas and the Black Messiah, right? Which actually caused me to shed a couple of tears. Surprising. Some is a go, some it's not a go. But Judas and the Black Messiah depicts oppression that's being fueled by fear, right? Fear of the rabbit waking up. Fear of organizing. And so you have Fred Hampton, who's a real person. He wasn't feared because he preached violence. That's actually not what was going on, although he really knew how to use those words. He was feared because he was able to unify people. He was able to unify the poor, black, white, brown, all of those communities. They call it the Rainbow Coalition, right? He called out systemic injustice and he made it very clear. And then he inspired dignity in people instead of submission, right? And submission kind of goes with control. So the Bible says, come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, right? We don't die, we multiply. And so when you see an example like that in the Bible, you see Pharaoh where he's enslaving these people because he's imagining revolt and he knows that the number is greater than his leaders. And so he's fearing the Israelites, or maybe he fears the dominion of the God that is greater than he is, right? Now, when you take it back to Judas and the Black Messiah, you're looking at the state. And so you can see the state as Pharaoh, right? And then you can see Fred Hampton as Moses, or this messianic figure, right? The Messiah. And then O'Neill, the little snitch, that's Judas. And Judas is actually weaponized by fear. Fear of death. Incarceration, right? So the predator is the person who strikes first, not because the rabbit has a gun, right? But because one day the rabbit just might have the audacity to pick one up. And the fear of becoming prey creates our monsters, real life monsters. And then in Avatar, you have this myth of pure victims and then pure villains. That's broken down, it's dismantled in this movie. And you have the fire clans, right? And I guess you could sort of align that biblically with people being harmed, religious injustice, trauma, right? And they choose domination instead of healing from that. And they're the fire clans, so you either warm it or you scorch it, right? And so when you look in Genesis, I think it's chapter 4, it says, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but you must rule over it, right? Crouching tiger, hidden dragon. You got Cain killing Abel right at the beginning, not because Abel harmed him. That's not why. But because Cain feared being outshined, he feared being replaced, he feared being diminished, belittled. being seen less than, right? So some uncomfortable truths start coming out, right? So sometimes the rabbit with the gun is not bringing justice. That's uncomfortable to understand because it's not always the hero. Instead, it brings this role of reversal, and it's not a transformation. Those two things are not the same, right? And in the Bible, it's something that consistently is critiquing this idea. In Exodus 23, you shall not oppress, for you know the heart of the oppressed. You have been on the receiving end of the oppressed, right? So in the Bible, you see oppression escalating when those people in power fear revenge. You have Herod, right? He kills babies because he doesn't want a king, especially one that seems to be seen as better than him, right? He doesn't want to be belittled. You have the religious leaders that killed Jesus, right? Because they feared the loss of authority over the people and they were abusing their authority. Then you have Rome, who allowed it. Why? To prevent uprisings, because the people outnumbered the leadership, so they knew that they would be conquered. So in every case, the predator is projecting its own capacity for violence onto its prey. Now, where you heard of that happening before? But also in the Bible, you have Jesus who comes along, right? And he starts speaking against armed rebellion. In Matthew 26, he says, those who live by the sword shall perish by the sword. Right? You live by the gun, you die by the gun. Not because injustice should perish, but because revenge replicates the predator-prey cycle. And that's why the culture is being called out right now, because it perpetuates a cycle. And there are a group of folks closely monitoring those embers, right? And just remember, the fire, it can warm and keep us all cozy and alive, right? Or it could burn the whole damn thing down. And somebody's watching, wanting the whole damn thing to be burned down, right? Back to the Bible. Because we often see that as good versus evil, right? But the Bible doesn't have a predator as the evil person, the prey is the good person. What it does is it frames this story as fear-based power versus love-rooted authority, domination versus stewardship, revenge versus restoration. So both of these films was moving me in a way, right? With Judas and the Black Messiah, it's just showing how fear of accountability, it fuels this preemptive violence. And then you have Avatar, Fire and Ash, that just giving us that warning that survival without moral grounding can harden our cruelty. It can cause that to stir up inside. And it's not about what you look like. It's not about your species. It's not about your race. It's not about your money, right? And then in the Bible, at 1 Corinthians 13, it says that deeds done without love are meaningless. And you see that in the Avatar, okay? So liberation that is not transformed by love, it just becomes another empire, thirsty for power and domination. So oppression is really about keeping the prey weak, right? It's about preventing the predator from becoming accountable. That's what power is really about. And a lot of folks see the Bible as weak and painfully submissive. But the Bible does never, it never promises that the rabbit will never hold the power. It never promises that, right? It's more like trying to awaken you to it. So the Bible is more asking a harder question. And that question is, what will we become when we do hold the gun? We know the heart of the oppressor. Do we then just turn into the oppressor? That is the fear that fuels the cycle that we have spent hundreds of years in. But that's just my opinion and me bumping my gums. I definitely love to hear what you got to say about it.